"Can I sit with you?" The maid's toddler whispered. He didn't know. She wasn't just a maid's dogter. He had not eaten a meal with another human being in 4 years. Not once. Not a birthday dinner. Not a holiday table. Not even a quick coffee shared across a counter. 4 years of silence. 4 years of silver cutlery. 4 years of the hollow sound of a fork hitting a plate in a room built for 12. And then a 3-year-old girl in muddy shoes walked into his dining room, looked up at him with enormous brown eyes, and whispered 4 words that would change everything he thought he knew about himself. "Can I sit with you?" Elliot Graves did not answer right away. He stood there, 6'2", net worth somewhere north of $400 million, master of boardrooms and offshore accounts and cold, efficient decisions, and he could not find a single word. Because no one had ever asked him that before. Not like that. Not with that kind of pure, uncomplicated honesty. Not without wanting something first. She was 3 years old. She had a small smear of strawberry jam on her chin. She was holding a plastic cup with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. And she was looking at him the way children look at people when they haven't yet learned to be afraid of them. He should have said no. He should have sent her back to the kitchen. Back to her mother. Back to the part of this house where she belonged. He didn't. And that one moment, that quiet, almost unremarkable moment, would cost him everything he thought he was building. And give him everything he never knew he needed. Elliot Graves woke up at 5:15 every morning. Not because an alarm told him to. Because silence did. The kind of silence that fills a 12,000 square foot estate in the Connecticut hills when you are the only living soul inside it. The kind that presses against the walls at night and greets you in the morning like a faithful, terrible companion. He would shower in a bathroom bigger than most people's apartments. Dress in clothes that cost more than a year's salary for most of a staff. Sit at a kitchen island that could seat 8 and eat the same breakfast every single day. Black coffee, 2 eggs scrambled, half a grapefruit. Alone. Not because he had to. Because there was no one to sit across from. Elliot had built Graves Capital from a desk in a 1-bedroom apartment when he was 24 years old. By 29, he was being profiled in financial magazines. By 32, the estate in Connecticut was his primary residence. His New York penthouse was just somewhere he slept between meetings, and he had enough zeros in his portfolio to buy small countries. He also had no close friends. He had associates. He had advisors. He had a personal assistant named Douglas who communicated almost exclusively by email and seemed to exist only as text on a screen. He had a 3-person household staff who came and went on rotating schedules and had been trained, either by him or by the agency that employed them, to be invisible. His last serious relationship had ended 3 years ago. Her name was Vivian. She had told him, calmly and without cruelty, that loving him was like loving a building. Beautiful from the outside. Empty inside. He had not argued. He had not cried. He had gone back to work the same afternoon. The estate had a home gym he used obsessively. A library lined floor to ceiling with books he read alone, in an armchair by the window, with a glass of single malt and the sound of wind through the old oaks outside. There was a pool he swam in at dawn alone, watching the mist rise off the water. There was a portrait in the upstairs hallway, a photograph of his mother and father on their wedding day. The only personal object he had kept after they died within 18 months of each other. He passed it every morning. He never stopped to look at it. Or rather, he never let himself. He was efficient. He was controlled. He was, by every external measure, successful. He was profoundly, catastrophically alone. And he had built every wall himself, brick by careful brick, and mortared them with work and distance until the walls were so thick he could no longer remember what warmth felt like on the other side. That was the world Elliot Graves lived in. Until the morning Sarah Dalton arrived with 2 suitcases, a resignation letter from the previous housekeeper, and a toddler she had no choice but to bring with her. Seraphina Dalton, Sarah, to everyone who knew her, was 26 years old and had not slept a full night in 3 years. She was not complaining. She had made her peace with it long ago, the way you make peace with weather you cannot change. You dress for it. You adapt. You keep moving. She arrived at the Graves estate on a Tuesday morning in October with Lily on her hip, one suitcase of her own belongings, and one smaller one packed with a 3-year-old's entire world: stuffed animals, board books, a beloved purple blanket that had been washed so many times it was almost translucent. The agency had assured her the position included the cottage on the property grounds. A private space, separate from the main house. Room enough for her and Lily. What the agency had not fully explained was the nature of the man who owned the property. The briefing had been terse. Mr. Graves values efficiency. Mr. Graves does not require personal engagement. Mr. Graves is not interested in conversation during working hours. There was a printed list of duties. There was a schedule. There were rules about which rooms required what level of cleaning. There was no mention of kindness. There was no mention of unkindness either, which Sarah would later decide was more or less accurate. Elliot Graves was not a cruel man. He was simply a man who had forgotten, or perhaps never fully learned, how to be in the presence of other people without making them feel like furniture. Sarah understood difficult circumstances. She had grown up in rural Maine in a house that was more mortgage than home, with a father who worked double shifts and a mother who worked herself into an early grave. She had gotten a scholarship, started a business degree, fallen in love with the wrong person, gotten pregnant at 22, and watched everything she had carefully planned collapse around her like a house of cards in a light wind. She did not tell people this story. It was hers and she kept it close. What she focused on always was Lily. Lillian and Dalton was 3 years and 4 months old. And she was, by any reasonable accounting, extraordinary. Not in the way all parents think their children are extraordinary, though Sarah thought that too, helplessly, constantly. Lily was extraordinary in the way that certain very small people are extraordinary. She had a quality of attention that was almost unsettling. When she looked at you, she looked at you, not past you, not through you, directly at you, with those wide, serious, amber-brown eyes that seemed to have arrived in the world already knowing something. She talked constantly, long, winding, earnest monologues about birds she had seen and what she believed they were saying to each other, about the colors of clouds, and whether they had feelings, about what she wanted to be when she grew up, which changed daily but had recently settled on either a veterinarian or a baker, and she could not yet decide if those were different things. She laughed at unexpected moments and went very quiet at others, as if listening to something no one else could hear. On the morning they arrived, Sarah carried both suitcases up the gravel path while Lily walked beside her, looking up at the main house with an expression of absolute calm wonder. "It's very big," Lily said. "It is," Sarah agreed. "Does the man who lives here have a dog?" "I don't think so." Lily considered this seriously. "Maybe he needs one." Sarah did not laugh, though she wanted to. "Come on, baby. Stay close." The first week, Elliot did not speak to Lily once. He was aware of her the way you are aware of a sound at the edge of your hearing. He would come downstairs in the morning, and Lily would be at the kitchen table with her crayons or her board books, and she would look up and watch him with those careful eyes. He would walk past. She never seemed offended. The second week, there was a Thursday morning where Elliot came downstairs early, unable to sleep, and found the kitchen empty except for Lily. She was sitting on the floor underneath the kitchen table, playing with a set of small plastic animals arranged in what appeared to be a very precise configuration.
He stopped.
She looked up at him from under the table. "I'm making a zoo," she said, as if this required no further explanation. He poured his coffee, sat at the island, opened his laptop, said nothing. She went back to her zoo. For 20 minutes, the only sounds in the kitchen were the click of his keyboard and the soft voices she made for the animals. just under her breath. A giraffe was apparently having trouble deciding where to sleep. The elephant was being very understanding about it. He worked. She played. When Sarah came back in, slightly breathless and apologetic, Lily looked up and said simply, "We were fine." Elliot said nothing, but he did not correct her. The third week, Lily discovered that he worked in the library in the evenings. She knocked on the door. An actual knock. 3 small, precise taps. He opened it, expecting Sarah. Lily stood there in her pajamas, holding her purple blanket, looking up at him. "I can't sleep," she said. "My brain is too loud." He blinked. "That happens to me sometimes," he said. It came out before he decided to say it. She seemed to find this deeply satisfying. "What do you do?" "I read." She looked past him at the library, at the floor-to-ceiling shelves, the warm lamplight, the big armchair by the window. "Can I look at books too?" "I'll be very quiet." He stepped aside and let her in. She chose a large illustrated guide to the birds of North America from the lowest shelf and settled herself in the corner of the sofa with her blanket, opening it with the seriousness of a scholar. He went back to his armchair. They sat together for 40 minutes. She pointed out 3 birds she recognized. He told her what they were called. She repeated the names carefully, as if memorizing them. When Sarah found them, her face went through several emotions at once. Lily was asleep on the sofa, the bird book open on her chest. Elliot was still in his armchair, reading. He looked up. "She fell asleep," he said. "Unnecessarily." "I see that." Sarah's voice was very careful. "I'm sorry if she bothered you." "She didn't." He went back to his book. It was the 4th week when Lily said it for the first time. They were in the garden. Early morning. Elliot was walking the grounds before work, the way he sometimes did. Lily was already there, crouched near the base of the old oak tree, studying something on the ground. He walked past. She didn't look up. "Daddy," she said, "come look at this bug." He stopped. She still hadn't looked up. She was pointing at something in the dirt, entirely focused. He stood very still. She looked up then and saw his face. Something passed through her expression. Not embarrassment, not confusion. Something quieter. Like she had said a word and was waiting to see if it was the right one. He crouched down next to her. There was a small beetle, making its determined way across the earth. "That's a ground beetle," he said. "Is he lost?" "No. He knows where he's going." She watched the beetle for a moment. Then she stood up, brushed off her knees, and went back toward the cottage without another word. He stayed crouched there, looking at the ground where the beetle had been. He did not correct her. Not that morning. Not any morning after. Elliot Graves did not tell his business partners about the woman and her daughter living on his property. That, in hindsight, was his first mistake. His second mistake was allowing himself to feel anything at all. He didn't know it yet. He was still good at telling himself stories about distance and professionalism and the clean lines between a personal and professional life. But something had shifted beneath his careful surface. Quietly, like a fault line that hasn't moved yet but has already decided to. Sarah didn't know it either, or told herself she didn't. She was precise about her work. Warm with Lily, efficient with everything else. "Good morning, thank you, good evening." No personal questions. No lingering. She was, in other words, exactly the kind of person who is dangerous to a man who has forgotten what it feels like to be seen. And Lily, who had no idea that she was quietly dismantling a fortress that had taken a decade to build. One beetle in the garden and one shared library evening and one small, honest question at a time. Neither of them knew what was coming. If Sarah had taken the other position she'd interviewed for, the quieter household in Boston, none of this would have happened. If Elliot had followed his instincts the way he had for a decade and kept his distance, it would have stayed simple. But he hadn't. And now the thing that was going to change everything was already in motion. It just hadn't arrived yet. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon in November, 6 weeks after Sarah and Lily arrived. Harrison Whitmore wanted to meet. Whitmore Capital was the second-largest private equity group in the Northeast. Harrison himself was 63, polished, ruthless in the particular way that only old money allows, with a smile and a handshake and a set of knives concealed behind an obituary-ready generosity. He arrived the next afternoon in a car that cost more than the cottage on Elliot's grounds. Sarah served coffee. Whitmore barely glanced at her. He did, however, glance at Lily, visible through the kitchen window in the back garden, chasing something across the lawn with complete and total commitment. "You have a child?" Whitmore asked. "My housekeeper's daughter," Elliot said. Whitmore nodded and turned back to business. The deal he proposed was significant. A merger of asset portfolios. A combined fund that would effectively double Graves Capital's operating power within 18 months. The numbers were extraordinary. The kind of numbers that made even a man of Elliot's resources sit up straighter. There was, of course, a condition. Whitmore's investors, a consortium of family offices and pension funds, conservative to their core, required what he called clean optics. Stability. Order. A principal who projected the right kind of life. The words were smooth and indirect, the way old money always is. But the message was clear. They had researched Elliot. Single man, no complications, focused and controlled. They approved of that profile. What they needed was for it to remain consistent through 6 months of due diligence. "Any domestic complexity," Whitmore said, smiling pleasantly over his coffee, "should be resolved before the process began." Elliot looked at him. "Define complexity," he said. Whitmore looked toward the garden window. Lily had caught whatever she was chasing and was holding it up triumphantly, a small fist in the air. "I think you understand me," Whitmore said. After Whitmore left, Elliot sat in his study for a long time. The numbers on the paper in front of him were extraordinary. The next phase of Graves Capital required outside backing. He had known it for months. He had positioned everything for this exact opportunity. From somewhere in the house, faint and far away, he could hear Lily asking Sarah what sound a fox made. He picked up his pen. He put it back down. He told himself it was just business. Elliot called Douglas that evening and asked him to contact the agency. He did not sleep well. In the morning he was at his desk at 5 a.m. The house so quiet around him that the ticking of the hallway clock sounded like footsteps. He told himself the decision was logical, that it had nothing to do with Lily or Sarah personally, that Sarah would find another position easily, that the reference would be impeccable, that the severance would be generous. He told himself all of this until it almost sounded true. When Sarah came in at 7, Elliot was at the kitchen island with his coffee and a folded piece of paper he had folded and unfolded 4 times since 6 a.m. Lily came in behind her, wearing her coat because she wanted to go look at the frost on the grass before breakfast. She saw Elliot. She smiled. The kind of smile that has no calculation in it at all.
"Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said.
She went out the back door into the cold white garden without another word. Sarah poured herself a glass of water. She looked at the folded paper on the counter. Elliot said nothing. She did not ask, but she saw his face. She had grown up in a house where silence said more than words. She knew the specific quality of a silence that was building toward something you didn't want to hear. She recognized it in the set of his shoulders, in the way he was looking at his coffee instead of his laptop. She waited. The deal sat in Elliot's chest like a stone. $400 million in combined assets. The next phase of everything he had spent 10 years building. The logical choice. The right choice, by every financial measure he had ever been taught to use. He picked up the paper. He started to open it. He never got to finish. The back door opened. Lily came in from the garden, her cheeks pink from the cold, mud on both knees already. And in her hand was a small thing she had found under the oak tree. A fallen bird's nest.
Perfectly intact.
She walked straight to Elliot and held it up. "Look," she said. "The birds left it, but it's still their home." He looked at the nest. It was small and brown, woven together from dry grass and dark threads and what appeared to be a piece of pale blue ribbon, the kind that comes on a child's birthday gift. It was intricate. It was fragile. It was completely, undeniably beautiful. "I wanted you to have it," Lily said, "because your house is very big, and I think maybe you need something small in it." He looked at her. 3 years and 4 months old. Frost on her collar. Mud on her knees. Holding out to him, with absolute sincerity, the most valuable thing she had found that morning. Something in Elliot Graves' chest broke open. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly, the way ice breaks in spring. A hairline crack that runs all the way through. And then the whole thing shifts. He thought about his father, who had worked 60-hour weeks and died at 59 without ever once telling Elliot he was proud of him. Not because he wasn't. Elliot had understood that later, much later. But because they had both been so fluent in the language of silence. He thought about his mother, who had tried. Who had left notes in his school lunches until he was old enough to be embarrassed by them and asked her to stop. And she had stopped. And that had been a door closing. And he had never heard it close until right now in this kitchen. He thought about Vivian saying loving you is like loving a building. He thought about how many mornings he had eaten breakfast alone. How he had told himself that was fine. That was the cost of what he had built. That solitude was not loneliness. That a man who owned $400 million worth of assets had nothing to mourn. Lily was still holding out the nest. He took it. His hands were not visibly shaking. But inside, all the way down, he was shaking. "Thank you," he said. And his voice did something he had not permitted it to do in a very long time. It cracked. Just slightly. Just once. Lily nodded, satisfied. She looked at the folded paper on the counter. "What's that?" He looked at it. He looked at her. He looked at Sarah, who was standing very still by the kettle, watching him with an expression he could not fully read. Something careful and afraid and cautious. The look of a person who has been disappointed before and has learned to brace for it. He crumpled the paper. He dropped it in the bin. Sarah blinked. Lily had already moved on to examining the window for frost patterns. Elliot sat there with a bird's nest in his hands and $400 million worth of clean optics walking out of his life. And felt something entirely unexpected. Relief. He told Sarah that evening. Not all of it. Not at once. But enough. They were sitting at the kitchen table after Lily had gone to sleep. This was unusual. They didn't usually share the kitchen at night. But Elliot had knocked on the cottage door and asked if she had a moment, and she had said yes because something in his voice had changed. He told her about Whitmore, about the deal, about the condition. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You are going to let us go," she said. "Yes." She nodded. Not angry. Just tired in the way of someone who has lived through every version of this story already and is past being surprised by it. "What changed?" she asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "My parents died within 18 months of each other," he said finally. 4 years ago. My father first. My mother, I think she just stopped wanting to stay after he was gone." He paused. "After that, I told myself I was fine. I was busy enough not to notice I wasn't. I told myself this house was enough. That what I'd built was enough. That everything I'd traded away, the closeness, the messiness, He stopped. The noise. He looked toward the hallway, toward where the cottage sat at the edge of the grounds. The particular noise of someone who needs you. His voice was even. He was good at keeping his voice even. "I thought I'd chosen to be alone. I think I was afraid of what it would mean to choose otherwise." Sarah watched him. She did not say that she understood, though she did. She had her own version of this. Instead, she said quietly, "She talks about you." He looked up. "At night when I put her to bed. She tells me what you said about the beetle, about the birds." Sarah paused, a small smile at the corner of her mouth. "She said you're sad, but you're getting better." He was silent. "She's 3, Sarah said. "She doesn't know she's not supposed to say things like that." He looked down at the table. "I know," he said. Outside, the wind moved through the old oaks. The house was quiet in a different way than it had been quiet before. Not empty, just still. Elliot called Harrison Whitmore the next morning. Whitmore was patient, the way people who think patience is power always are. Elliot told him the terms were not acceptable. Whitmore reminded him what was at stake. The numbers, the timeline, the opportunity that would not come around again. Elliot thanked him for his time. He hung up. He sat in his study for a long time afterward, looking at the bird's nest he had placed on his desk, a thing that had no business being in that precise, ordered space, and somehow looked more right than anything else in the room. He had lost a significant deal. He would need to restructure his capital plans. Push timelines back 12 months, possibly 18. Take a longer, harder road. He found he minded none of it as much as he expected. He called Douglas and told him to cancel the contact to the agency. Douglas, to his credit, said understood and nothing else. Over the following weeks, things changed, slowly, the way real change always happens. Not in one dramatic moment, but in accumulation. In small choices made quietly, one after another. He started eating breakfast at the kitchen table instead of the island. Lily started joining him every morning without being invited, without needing to be, the way small children install themselves in spaces that feel safe. He bought a dog, a quiet, gentle greyhound named Ford who became Lily's best friend immediately and followed her everywhere at a dignified trot. He restructured Sarah's schedule. She had been working 6 days a week, and he had not noticed. He insisted on fixing it. She argued. He pointed out, with some amusement, that she was arguing against more time off. She conceded the point. He ordered a child's desk for the corner of the library so Lily had a place to draw her animals while he worked. He noticed he was less afraid than he used to be. Not fearless. Not transformed into something unrecognizable. Just less afraid. December came with soft gray skies and cold wood smoke and the quiet stillness of a countryside preparing for winter. Lily decided the estate needed a Christmas tree. Not a small one. A significant one. She had opinions about the size. She stated them clearly. Elliot, who had not decorated for Christmas in 4 years, said nothing. He came home from a meeting in the city one Friday afternoon to find a tree propped against the hallway wall, acquired from a farm stand down the road, which Lily described in extensive, enthusiastic detail. Ford the greyhound was sniffing its base with professional interest. Lily was on the stairs, arms crossed, watching Elliot's face. "Do you like it?" she asked. "It's large," he said. "That was my idea," she confirmed. He looked at Sarah, who was in the kitchen doorway with an expression trying very hard not to become something warmer than strictly appropriate. "I suppose we need lights," he said. "And a star," Lily said. "A real one for the top." Stars are not typically real. "You know what I mean." He did. They put up the tree together that evening. 2 hours. Several disagreements about light placement, all of which Lily settled unilaterally. Ford slept in front of it like a guardian. Afterward they sat in the living room, which had not been used as an actual living room in years, which had simply been a large formal space Elliot walked past on his way to somewhere else, and drank hot chocolate and looked at the lit tree in the way that people look at things when they are, for a moment, precisely where they are supposed to be. Lily fell asleep between them on the sofa. Neither Elliot nor Sarah moved her. Neither of them spoke for a while. "She's happy here," Sarah said finally. "I know," he said. He did not say, "and so am I." But Sarah heard it anyway. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun, soft and unhurried, settling over the grounds and the old oak tree and the place beneath it where a beetle had once walked in a particular direction and a small girl had called a man by the wrong name for the very first time. The house was not silent anymore. It was full. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just full. "There is a photograph on the desk in the library now," Not a professional portrait. Not something posed or formal. A candid shot that Sarah took one afternoon in January. Elliot in the armchair by the window, the winter light coming in pale and low, Lily asleep against his arm with the bird book open on her lap, her small hand curled around his sleeve. He is looking down at her. He does not know the photo is being taken. He does not know his face looks like that, like a man who has found his way home. She printed it quietly and left it on his desk one morning. He never asked about it. He never mentioned it. He never moved it. Lily still calls him Daddy sometimes. Not always. Sometimes just Elliot, as if she is testing the weight of different names. He does not correct either one. He closed a different deal in February. Smaller. On better terms. With partners who had not required him to scrub his life clean before shaking his hand. It took longer. It was harder. It was worth it. The bird's nest is still on his desk. Fragile and intricate, and exactly where it belongs. There is a version of this story where Elliot Graves said no on that Tuesday morning in October when a 3-year-old in muddy shoes asked to sit with him at breakfast.
It would have been the sensible thing. The professional thing.
The version of himself that had eaten alone for 4 years would have said no without a second thought. But he didn't. And sometimes, that is all transformation is. One moment of not saying no. One moment of letting something small and true come close enough to matter. One bird's nest. One shared meal. One small voice that cut through every carefully constructed wall simply because it had not yet been taught that walls existed. If you watched the story and felt something shift inside you, that quiet recognition of something you have been protecting yourself from, or something you have been quietly longing for, then you already know what this is about. It is not just about a billionaire and a little girl. It is about all of us. All the rooms we have stopped walking into. All the tables we have eaten at alone. All the questions we have never asked because we were afraid of the answer. Can I sit with you? It is the simplest sentence. It is the bravest sentence. If stories about the quiet, powerful, ordinary ways that humans find their way back to each other move you the way they move us, then this channel is exactly where you belong. We will see you in the next story.